Students return to the University of Texas amid protests over a new law allowing guns on campus. Could the protests and a lawsuit have an impact on colleges in Texas? Donald Trump brings his presidential campaign to Texas, but some state Republicans decide not to join the rally. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. Donald Trump made headlines this week when he brought his campaign to Austin. Supporters lined up outside the Moody Theater downtown, waiting to see the Republican nominee hold a town hall broadcast on Fox News. But not everyone was happy to see Trump.
Build bridges, not walls. Build bridges, not walls.
Protesters lined the sidewalks outside the theater, chanting and waving signs. There was a similar scene a few blocks away where Trump attended a fundraiser in downtown Austin. Trump supporters turned out in force later that evening, packing a campaign rally at the Travis County Expo Center. Our Kevin Schwaller was there and brings us a closer look.
The chant has special significance in Texas, as the state is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on border security.
We are going to enforce the law.
Trump also said he spoke with mothers whose children died at the hands of undocumented immigrants. They shared their stories with the crowd.
My only son was murdered by an illegal alien, and I am a legal immigrant. It took my family 13 years.
The issue of border security has been a hotly debated one in Texas, with Democrats accusing Republicans of militarizing the border. Texans supporting Trump, who spoke to us, largely endorsed his message and point to what they view as threats from Mexico and from terrorists.
If it was me, I'd shut the border down 100%. I wouldn't let anything through, in or out. I would go to all of the people in the business and say, we're just shutting it down, dudes.
Is that an issue that's important to you?
Very important to me, yes.
And why is that?
Well, I'm concerned about what's going on in our country right now with ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
That was Kevin Schwaller reporting. Trump drew big crowds, but some big-name Republicans decided to stay. And for an in-depth look at Trump's visit, we turn to our roundtable. Patrick Svitek with the Texas Tribune and Jim Henson from the Texas Politics Project. Welcome.
Hello. Great to be here.
So you saw Trump in Austin this past week. What did you think when everyone was out there lining up to see him and you had protesters and people that were supporting him? What was your initial thoughts?
I think it was exactly the kind of scene that I expected to see, given that we had the Republican presidential candidate come to Texas and come to one of the more liberal parts of Texas. And so I think it was, it kind of lived up to my expectations, at least in that regard.
Is it surprising that Trump even decided to come to Texas at this point?
Well, there was a lot of buzz about that. I mean, I think he was here to raise money, and their model, for better or for worse, has been if he's raising money or he's somewhere, he's going to do a public rally and try to get some media attention. And I think, that's one of the things I really noticed about being there is you really did get the palpable feel of this combination of celebrity and politics in the room. It's not just like your typical political rally, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it should be noted when he came here for 2 days in June, that was back when he was the presumptive Republican presidential nominee. He also tacked on a bunch of public events or a few public events to some fundraisers he had planned before. So this is not new to have him come to a red state like Texas and campaign publicly in addition to privately.
Would you consider this visit successful for his campaign?
I think it was, actually. I think it was a relatively good day for him. If you set aside some of the muddying of the immigration issue that happened during that Sean Hannity taping, if you look at just the public rally, he came there obviously with a few different messages he wanted to drive. I don't think he said anything at that rally that his advisors didn't want him to say. And so I think in the world of Donald Trump, that's a good day.
This is a successful teleprompter Trump exercise,
Was there anything off the wall that surprised you? I mean, I've learned to be always surprised at a Trump thing,
You know what I thought was surprising? I don't know about you. I mean, you've seen several of them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he was so scripted, I mean, he went through a long passage where he was reciting statistics about the workforce composition as part of his appeal to either African Americans or moderate Republicans, depending on how you understand that. And that was very un-Trump-like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that maybe stood out to me was that he did speak about immigration in his public rally remarks, but it was nothing like what you heard a few hours earlier in that Sean Hannity taping where he suggested there could be like a softening in immigration laws. So there were some mixed messages then. Obviously, we're 4 days later now, we've seen how this has played out, and there's still very mixed messages about how his immigration positions are shaping up. And so I think it was interesting to see that kind of mess begin here in Austin.
Was there anyone that was in the crowd at any of the events that surprised you, that you didn't expect to show up?
No, not exactly. I mean, I think the most visible Texas Republican who spoke at the Trump rally was Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller, who has kind of had a bit of a growing role within the campaign, helping recruit agricultural leaders, not just here in Texas, but across the country. And so I think he was not a surprise, but definitely the most eye-catching, state Republican official to speak.
And he hung around a bit. And, I saw at least one pretty prominent Republican consultant, to my mind, looking very well dressed and kind of out of place walking around in the crowd. So, I mean, I think, there's a center of gravity here. And you saw some of that, even though there were people that stayed away.
Yeah.
Who did not show up that Trump really needed to show up?
Well, I think anytime the governor is not involved in these kinds of events, that always draws attention. Governor Abbott's office said that he had to be in San Antonio as part of ongoing treatment for the burns he suffered on family vacation. So that was his reasoning for not being there or being involved in any of these events that Trump had in Texas. So I think that stands out. What has been more attention-grabbing to me is the fact that of the supporters that Trump does have in Texas, over these past 4 weeks since the convention, a lot of them have hung on to Trump. None of them have defected. Some of them have taken even bigger roles within his campaign. And so I think that's more interesting to see the people who he does have in Texas, this coalition he does have, they're only seeming to get more enthusiastic about him, even as it's been a pretty rough 4 weeks for him.
Anyone you missed?
Well, I mean, I think Patrick's right. The governor not being there kind of stands out. But I think you've seen Texas Republicans making their own judgments about this, and depending on where you are, the judgment looks very different. I mean, so you've got some kind of strange bedfellows in the sense that, of course, Ted Cruz wasn't there, but you've got people as different as Ted Cruz and Speaker Joe Straus kind of staying away from Trump. So he scrambled the equation here, and it's kind of every person for themselves in terms of making their decisions about how close to get or how much to stay away.
As we were saying, a lot of the people that we noted were state Republicans who did not come out to Trump's rally. One who was there was Congressman John Carter from Round Rock. I spoke with him after the event and asked if backing Trump could lead to bigger things for him. Could you see yourself being involved in a Trump administration?
I'm running for re-election, and I plan to be in Congress. Hopefully I'll be in Congress and I'll be once again working on Homeland Security, which this will be, I'm term limited on we term limit, Republicans term limit on our committee chairmanships, Democrats don't. So at this end of the 6 years, I'll be moving to a different subcommittee. But I have got a lot of projects I'm trying to get finished, all I hope to make Homeland Security safer.
That's a big topic for him. I mean, what if he taps you for something?
Well, I'm not looking to have that happen. If he does, my wife and I will pray on it and we'll figure out what we want to do.
Carter had an interesting take on Trump's popularity and why he thinks Texans who don't support him now could come around. We'll hear more from the congressman later in the show. But first, protest on campus over the state's new campus carry law. Will this lead to a change on gun policies? Our roundtable takes on the topic next on State of Texas. Students returned to the University of Texas this week amid protests over the new campus carry law. Crowds filled the West Mall. 3 professors who filed suit to stop the law addressed the students, urging them to push for change.
There's a lot of disappointment and sadness. I think the emotion I hear most from students is sadness, that they don't want guns in their learning environment.
But people who support campus carry say they're feeling targeted themselves. Most don't want anyone to know they're carrying a gun.
A lot of people are worried about someone finding out, someone seeing their firearms. They're worried about being picked on in class. They're worried about the professors, single them out.
The professors who sued tried to get an injunction to keep the law from taking effect, but a federal judge refused their request. We welcome back our roundtable now. Jim, your office is on the UT campus. What's it been like since students are back and this law's in effect?
Well, I mean, I think at one level you're not sensing much difference, I don't think, other than the big protest on the first day of class and the sex toy giveaway the day before. I mean, I think there was a lot of attention to that. It was a pretty creative example of protest, but it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna materially change implementation of the law. I think my colleague's suit is not having a lot of success in court. My sense is any changes that are going to come to this are going to have to come from the legislature. And frankly, this legislature did this over the objections of most of the campuses. So I think it's an uphill battle to get this changed at this point.
What's your take? I mean, I know a lot of people were covering it up until, and now it's in effect. What have you noticed?
Yeah, I don't think, kind of going off what Jim was saying, I'm not on the campus every day like he is, but I don't think we would have really known about it going into effect if it weren't for the protests and the sex toy giveaway. So I think that, you know, again, drawing attention to it in a very creative way obviously works. Got a lot of attention over the past few days, but I think as far as the law being implemented and moving forward, I think that train has kind of left the station.
You guys are being very, you know, PG, I guess, about the sex toys. But do you think anything is going to change as the session comes up? Are there going to be any tweaks to this law, possibly?
Well, I think that's what advocates want. I don't know that there is a lot of will in the legislative majority for that to happen. You know, a lot of the things that people are asking for now, more latitude for professors in classrooms, were discussed, and the legislative majority didn't want to provide that. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of will in the legislature to carry that off. I could be wrong, but it certainly doesn't look that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the legislative majority has spoken on this issue, and I don't think that they're going to, again, the will is there to take it up again this session. I mean, you could even see kind of the more conservative wing of the legislative majority pushing for further expanding gun rights in Texas this session, let alone, you know, not tweaking what's already in place.
Plus, I kind of think lawmakers will want to see, you know, how it plays out over a little bit more time, because it'll only be in effect for 6 months by then.
Well, I think that's a very charitable view of it, but you know, I think Patrick's right. I mean, if there's any impetus in the legislature for guns to come up this time, it will be probably in the other direction of trying to find other ways of expanding Second Amendment rights, you know, lowering thresholds for licensing and things like that. And I don't think they're very likely to do anything that is going to alleviate the concerns of those protesters or those faculty members.
You never know. You might be surprised. All right. Thank you guys for being with us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Ahead on State of Texas, we get a different perspective on Donald Trump's visit to Austin.
I like him. He's actually a pretty soft-spoken guy when you're one-on-one with him.
Congressman John Carter joins us to talk Trump and a proposal to help police prepare for active shooters. Next. Welcome back to State of Texas. Some Republicans skipped Donald Trump's visit to Austin, but Congressman John Carter from Round Rock made sure he was in the audience. I spoke with Carter after Trump's visit, and he shared his perspective on the Republican nominee and why he thinks support for Trump will grow in Texas. You were at the reception this week for Donald Trump. Have you met him before?
Yeah, I met him one time in Washington. He came by the club across the street and met all the Republican members of Congress.
What do you think of him?
I like him. He's actually a pretty soft-spoken guy when you're one-on-one with him, and I think he's very clever.
How did you feel like Texans received him?
He got a big reception out there. That was a gigantic traffic jam when it was all over with. But yeah, they were enthusiastic, and I don't know how many thousands, but there were thousands of people inside and out.
A lot of Republicans don't really like him that much.
Some don't. I think they'll come around before the election's over.
Why is that?
Because they don't like Hillary Clinton a lot more than they don't like him.
What specific things do you like that he's saying? I mean, any policy that sticks out to you?
Look, I didn't get involved in the primary, but I am a loyal Republican. Our parties chose this man to be our candidate, and I support the Republican Party. I have met him. He is much more reasonable than the press paints him, and I actually think he does a lot of thinking like judges do their thinking. He gathers information until he finally makes a decision which direction he's going to go. He may have a preconceived notion, but he's willing to change that preconceived notion as he has more experiences. That's kind of the way I think people to be.
You would think that because you were a judge, right?
Right.
So is there a specific thing that he's mentioned about what his policy as president would be that has really, really interested you?
That's real easy. His theory is, if it's the law, we follow the law. And you know what? That's a real change from this administration.
Specifically, I know he talked a lot about police presence in light of what happened in Dallas with the police shootings. You were behind the Police Protection Act. Talk to me about that one.
The Police Act is an act we passed to get further education for our law enforcement officers. You know, our cities like Austin can afford to send people off to specialized training. The active shooter concept of training is what you use on these mass shootings that are taking place. All the big cities are training on that. FBI has been trained for years. We need to get training down to our small and mid-sized departments of all law enforcement. The Police Act gives them an ability to use COPS grants for training. COPS grants have never been for training before. This would allow the mid-sized and smaller departments to send people off to the ALERT program here in Texas, which is done by Texas State right to the south of us. And they got a great program.
You know, and sadly, it takes the climate we're in right now to actually, you know, get legislation like that on the forefront, right?
Well, maybe. Yeah, I certainly did catch on, and I had a huge support from my fellow members of both parties. Everybody wants to make sure that we train our people so our police stay alive and they are able to do their job and take out the bad guys. And it's not just for police, it's also for EMS. Because when a policeman goes into a building where an active shooting is going on, he has a certain amount of responsibility to take care of the wounded. We send the EMS in, also trained how to behave, and they can take care of the wounded as he moves on to take care of the shooter.
What kind of response have you gotten from the law enforcement community?
Everyone I've talked to has been super thankful and super excited. The big cities are not as affected as much as the smaller areas, although I'm sure they're going to use COPS grants too for training.
How do you keep something like that going? I mean, as time goes by, you know, and there may not be police shootings for a while, how do you keep funding something like that?
COPS grants have been funded for the hiring of police officers. The first 2 years, basically, of the person you hired is taken care of in the COPS grant. After that, it's the responsibility of the entity that hires the police officer or sheriff's deputy or whatever they are. They've been around for a long time. We fund them every year. Some cities like them, some cities don't like them because you get a free cop for 2 years, but then you got to pay for him for 20. And do they really have the funds to do that? So that's kind of the decisions city councils and county commissioners courts have to make on COPS grants. But training, additional training is always, just like our soldiers, the better trained, the better policeman.
Congressman Carter is running for re-election this year. He has served in the House since 2003. Ahead on State of Texas, we'll look at the week in politics, including a key meeting on how the state chooses and pays for road projects. And we'll remember a woman who helped drive the plan to restore the Texas State Capitol. That's all coming up. Paying for road construction is on the agenda for lawmakers at the Capitol this week. On Tuesday, the House Committee on Transportation will hear testimony on how TxDOT selects road projects and how they're funded. On Wednesday, the State Board of Dental Examiners will hold a special meeting. They'll decide how to respond to last week's Sunset Advisory Commission decision to improve oversight of dentists giving anesthesia to patients. Also on Wednesday, Texas Secretary of State Carlos Cascos will join an American history class at UT. It's part of his outreach to get students to register to vote. A woman who helped shape the restoration of the state capitol died last week. Funeral services were held Saturday for Nelda Laney, the wife of former Texas House Speaker Pete Laney. Mrs. Laney was considered a driving force behind the restoration of the state capitol building in the early 1990s. She also created the annual Capitol Christmas Ornament fundraiser, which raises money for Capitol preservation. Nelda Laney was 73 years old. That is our show. Thank you for watching State of Texas. Remember, you can join us every Sunday morning at 8:30. Meet the Press is coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.